What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. I took my time to make this video for you and drill down what's happening on my whiteboard and talk more about, what's happening with the latest news surrounding China and Saudi Arabia, how they're coming into a mutual agreement to no longer use the petrodollar as a form of payment to buy oil and instead use the yuan. So then it's going to be called the Petro Yuan. They're coming to an agreement, and so far we've been seeing a lot of changes, including the UAE making their first transaction settle in yuan, involving the trade of natural gas to China. And there's more coming, like Iraq. They're gonna start utilizing the yuan very soon. And so we've been seeing a lot of these changes happen, including Brazil and China. But first of all, I want to get started talking about the latest news and how's that significant and what will it impact, um, uh, how will impact the market, including, treasury bonds, the value of dollar. Guys, this is really big. So I want to take my time and draw this down on the whiteboard and tell you step by step how significant it is to us here, especially here in the US. So basically, um, yeah, um, so I took my time to draw this down for you and tell you how significant it is. As you know, we have $3.4 trillion of petrodollars circulating in the oil market, and this is how much is being used or transacted to buy oil. This is a big number. This is what makes the dollar a global reserve currency, or I want to say a common denominator for globally. And this one makes us like, the greatest country. And the biggest component of all of that is the petrodollar. This is how significant it is. Imagine if we have to now be using, let me just draw this down, add more. Remember, if this no longer will be utilized, and instead this right here will be called the yuan petro. That's an N. Sorry, yuan petro. So our currency will no longer be utilized to purchase oil in the oil market. And now instead it will be the yuan petro. And like I was saying, the petrodollar is what makes the dollar really valuable. So if we take that off now, $3.4 trillion, this will lose, our dollar will lose so much value. And then you have this impacting the US Treasury bond reserves that, currently banks around the world hold, the dollar as reserves. And, the cash held, among people, bank hold a lot of the dollars and the reserves, banks around the world, here, everywhere, and people that have cash on hands. And this right here is almost $14.5 trillion. That's a huge number. And I'll tell you how it will impact it. And this 3.4 is 1/4, almost 1/4 approximately of the $14.5 trillion that is invested in US Treasury bonds, reserves like bank holds, institutions, organizations that have dollars in their reserves, and also plus the cash held in people's hands that is in dollars. And so that 1/4 of the treasuries and reserves and cash held will be gone, and instead will be utilizing the yuan petrol. And again, the petrodollar is so valuable because the reason why people choose to invest, and here, one second. People choose to invest. Sorry, let me just invest invest and the um invest in the treasury bonds because the petrodollar makes the dollar really valuable, and so that's because it's so valuable. People choose to invest in U.S. Treasury bonds and keep dollars in the reserve, and even keep cash on hand. And so and imagine if we no longer be utilizing the petrodollars to buy oil, people will lose interest in investing dollars or buying our treasury bonds just because the dollar lost a lot of value. And so this will diminish. And I'll tell you why this will have effect on the bond yield. So if now well, this is basically having a knock-on effect because uh, uh, the petrodollar is no longer petrodollars, so people are investing less in treasury bonds, and because people are investing less in treasury bonds, it's gonna make the bond prices plummet. The bond prices plummet. And so when the bond price plummet, the interest yield is gonna go up. And the people that choose foreign countries that choose to invest in the treasury bonds, they invest in the treasury bonds so they can earn interest on interest yield on the bonds, and that's considered capital. So when they choose to buy bonds, it has these bonds got maturity, 5-10 years maturity, and over time they're earning interest yield on these bonds. And so now because less people are investing in bonds, the bond prices will plummet, and it's going to increase the interest yield by a lot, and it's gonna make it risky. And so this is going to have an impact on the borrowing cost. So this have gonna have an impact on the borrowing cost. And so this pen is weird. Sorry about that. on the borrowing cost. So our borrowing costs will be so much higher now just because the interest yield is so high on bonds, just because bond plummeted. And that's going to happen in the near future. So borrowing is going to be more expensive. I say borrowing costs. So it's going to be more expensive to borrow because these loans will have a high interest, and just because the bond yield went up due to the fact bond plummeting. So the bond prices will plummet, right? Like I was saying, plummet. That's a will plummet. And so this is having an effect on a lot of things. So I started talking about how, how much petrodollar is being used to buy oil, 3.4, which is 1/4 of what people choose to invest in treasury bonds, have dollar in their reserve, including banks, big institution organizations that have dollar in their reserve, as well as, consumer cash on held in dollars. So if people now, lack interest in having dollars, just because the yuan petrol is going to be more dominant, more valuable in the global market. Now people would choose to invest less in our treasury bonds that are, the safest assets. And so less people will, be purchasing treasury bonds, and this will impact the $14.5 trillion by a lot. And because people are buying less bonds, as you know, supply and demand, so less people are purchasing bonds, and the lesser people purchase bonds, that's gonna, you know, um, um, decrease the bond price and actually have it plummet. And when bond prices decrease, and since it's inversely proportional to the interest yield of the bonds, bond go down, and the bond yield will go up. So when bond goes down, the bond price goes down, plummets, the yields skyrockets. Because it actually makes it more risky now. So now the bond is so risky, that's why the yield is so high. And so because the yield is so high, it's going to affect the interest on our, borrowing costs like loans, car loans, mortgages, credit cards, and stuff like that. So this is having an impact on everything, our daily life here. And so because of that now, um, it's gonna have, it's gonna impact. Sorry, one sec. This is really annoying. This is gonna impact consumers, you know, consumers here in the US. So because now we have higher borrowing costs, it's more expensive to borrow car loans, pay off credit cards. We're going to be charging higher interest. And so, we having consumer spend less, spend less. And so because, now consumers are having to spend less just because the borrowing cost is much more higher, and due to the fact that interest rates are going to go up because of all of this. And now, so this is going to have its impact on the market, and most likely, the stock market uh will plummet. So we're going to experience a market crash, possibly. Now, maybe in May or June, and but it's going to take some time to really impact the market. It's not going to happen overnight. It might take, 6 weeks. but it's gonna start, end of April, and we're gonna start seeing that, I'll say, market crash. Yeah. So the market will probably lose most likely 60% negative. So that's gonna, significantly impact our market here in the US, just because due to the fact the bond costs will go up, and that's because bond prices went down and the yield is so high due to the fact, the petrodollar is nothing significant. The OPEC will not no longer be utilizing the petrodollar. And so I also want to talk about, how the petrodollar started. Back in 1973, the US had an agreement with Saudi Arabia as well as OPEC. And OPEC is an organization that represents the largest oil exporters or producers that are, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Emirates, Bahrain, all these, Middle Eastern countries. And so 1973, the US came into an agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is, to make sure that they, accept the US dollar as the only form of payment to buy oil. So any country in the world that's trying to, purchase oil or sell oil, have to be utilizing the US dollars as the only form of payment. And this agreement got entered in 1973, and they told him, to only have the US dollars be the only form of payment to purchase oil, but we want something back in return, which is, have the US, give us your weapons, and provide protection for Saudi Arabia, the kingdom, in case there's an attack by an outside country, a foreign country like Iran, Iraq, and the drama that's been happening in the Middle East, uh, um, currently, or even before, when Iraq had to wanted to invade Saudi Arabia. So they had a agreement guarantee that, we make sure that you provide protection to Saudi Arabia. In return, you make sure that you'll be utilizing to buy or sell the US dollars as the only form of payment, as well as having, whatever whatever surplus in US dollars you get out of the sales. Let's say they have a surplus, so they made a lot of sales, so a lot of people bought their oil, and now they have lots of lots of capital, lots of profit. So I would call it a surplus. If they had a surplus, and and surplus in dollars because of the oil sales, dollars from the sales, they would have to invest or buy our treasury bonds. Say they had, a surplus in dollars from the oil sales. So that was a big agreement that took place in 1973 to have, make sure to be using the petrodollars as the only form of payment to buy oil or sell oil, and in return, they would have to, we have to provide protection, give them our weapons from the US, provide protection to the Saudi kingdom, and they also made sure to, they told them to whatever cash, whatever extra cash they would, get out of these sales, whatever they make out of these sales, to make sure to have this, this extra cash be invested in our treasury bonds. So they almost had two in one, you know, you make sure you protect us, and we'll give you the US dollar as make sure it's the only form of payment. And if we make extra cash out of the sales that took place, if we have surplus in dollars from the oil sales, we will make sure to buy your treasury bonds as well, which makes the which would make the US dollars even more valuable. Because if you're having the US dollars, if you have the US dollars being invested in treasury bonds, like I was saying earlier, that's gonna have the dollar even more valuable because it's actually being used more in the global market. Now you're having this extra cash from the oil sales being invested in in treasury bonds now. So you have two benefits for the US, and then you have one benefit for the OPEC or Saudi Arabia. And so, but this used to be a huge common denominator, the US dollars used to be a huge common denominator for the global market, for the sales, for everything. And so you had these two things in one, and just so Saudi Arabia can have our weapons and protection and all of this security in the Middle East. And so we gave them, uh, uh, you know, we gave them our weapons, and in return they gave us the petrodollars, and whatever extra cash they would get from the sales, they would make sure to purchase our U.S. Treasury bonds. Then that would make our dollar even more valuable. But now, since this will no longer be utilized, and instead it will be the yuan petrol, it's gonna make a great impact, and then the treasury bonds will lose so much value that the interest yield on the bond price will be going up, and when it goes up, it's gonna increase our borrowing cost here in America, and because of that, it's gonna have an impact on consumer now because people. It'll be too expensive for people to borrow, and when people, lack the capability to borrow, it's gonna make them spend less. It's gonna make them spend less. And now, consumer demand is gonna shift. Consumer demand is gonna go down here internally, and then this will result in the market plummeting. Losing 60%. And so this is huge, guys. This is hella huge. Like, you know, I know people don't listen to news and stuff like that, but this is crazy. Uh, this is crazy. Yeah. So this have a huge impact. And also Brazil and China, sorry, Brazil and China just had and China just had an agreement to use yuan for trade. And Brazil, the biggest exporter of goods in Latin America, the biggest exporter. and Latin America. And Brazil just entered the, no, this is official. This is beside the US dollar, petrodollar being utilized, not no longer being utilized to buy oil. But Brazil and China on the other side now are wanting to use the yuan to export and import now. And we know Brazil is the biggest exporter of goods in Latin America. And so uh, we're having a lot of changes everywhere. And so they're gonna ditch the US dollars and their trade, Brazil and China. And Brazil uh, and China used to trade. I mean, still trade. They trade. Annually they trade $200 billion each year. That's how much the trades are worth. Each year they trade $200 billion in US dollars, and now they're gonna ditch the US dollars. So that $200 billion is going to disappear from the global market. Think about it, guys. $200 billion, 200, approximately $200 billion. This is beside the petrodollar. So really, guys, this has a significant impact. You have Brazil and China making a deal now; it's official. Brazil and China used to trade $200 billion worth of goods each year annually. Now this no longer is going to be circulating in the market. Instead, it's going to be in, they're going to be trading, uh, buying and selling in yuan. And Brazil is the biggest exporter of goods in Latin America. And, on the other side, we have now the OPEC, and OPEC is the, biggest oil organization that has the biggest exporters and producers of oil, having Saudi Arabia as the leader of OPEC. You have Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, the Emirates. All of these oil producers countries are part of the OPEC plus, and Saudi is the leader of exporter and the OPEC organization. And so now they don't want to be utilizing the petrodollar just because they're coming into a mutual agreement with China to now be using the yuan petro instead of the US dollar. So that will have less people investing in our treasuries here, just because the dollar has lost so much value. And this is 1/4 of the $14.5 trillion. The $14.5 trillion is how much treasuries and reserves and people having cash on hand. This is how much people have, $14.5 trillion. And the petrol is so significant. It's almost one fourth of the $14.5 trillion. That is, the bonds and the reserves and cash on health that people have. And so this is gonna have a knock-on effect. And so yeah, I just wanted to share this with you. And thank you so much for watching me draw everything down on my whiteboard, because I want to take my time to explain all these steps, and it's just so hard to say it verbally. I have to also draw it down for you so you can actually understand it. It's really complicated, but this is almost pretty much a knock-on effect, and it's gonna impact a lot of things. Um, everything to our borrowing cost here in the US, affecting our credit cards, affecting our daily spending, buying homes, mortgages. The interest on mortgages are going to skyrocket because of that. So the petrodollar was such a common denominator in the purchase of oil, uh, um, and now will no longer be utilized. And there's rumors, or speculation that this is going to be implemented really soon. The UAE settled their first transaction in yuan 4 days ago, involving the selling of the natural gas to China. They transported natural gas to China and have sold it in yuan, and that was 4 days ago. That has become official. But now Saudi Arabia, the biggest export and producer of oil, now will be officially be utilizing the yuan instead of the petrodollar, like I was saying. And then you got Iraq uh, thinking about settling the first transaction next month uh, with China and yuan. And you have a lot of factors going on. This will impact the dollar and it will diminish the dollar's value globally. That 3.4 is not looking very big compared to the 14.5 trillion dollars that's circulating in treasury bonds, dollar and bank reserves, institutions reserves, and cash on hand. But this it's gonna have a big impact in the long run, like how I explained. Um, Thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to give you this quick update surrounding the lot of the noise going on, and hope you paid attention. It's a long video. I try to make it smaller, but you know uh um yeah, this I just want to give you a quick update and explain to you all of that. Please subscribe to my channel. Hit the subscribe button down below. Let me know about your thoughts. Share your opinion. Leave a comment. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Let me know what you think about all of this petrodollar thing not being used anymore and the purchase of oil. And tell me about Brazil and China. Tell me everything you know. Let me know about your thoughts and leave a comment down below. Hit the subscribe button. Please join my channel because I have a lot of good videos. I explain a lot of things about the banking crisis right now, and and I explain a lot of stuff about politics and the news surrounding China and Saudi Arabia and how this will have a direct effect on us here internally. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.